Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. And I've said this before, I think about that title I came up with in 2013 September when I decided to make some videos. After doing research for about 10 years, I said to myself, wow, I've learned a lot, but what good is it if I don't share it? And number two, I learned that if I just try to talk to people, family members, friends, even strangers, uh, a majority of the people will withdraw and reject and get angry and run away and don't want to know these things that I've learned. Isn't that interesting? And I've noticed it at a recent Christmas event. We had a little party. You can have a dozen people and mention this kind of material, and most of them will roll their eyes and withdraw. It's really weird to watch, and if you're paying attention, you can see it. But a few people will appear to be quite knowledgeable and be aware and throw in their 2 cents, maybe even add something you didn't know. But for the most part, people uh, don't seem to be aware and subconsciously or whatever don't want to be aware and will actually revolt and reject what you have to say and maybe even ridicule you. But I tell people out there who want to share this material, don't worry about that. There's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do is try to share the material. And I've been watching a lot of videos over the Christmas holiday. I took a little trip, went over to the ocean and brought my laptop computer and watched some videos. Kind of interrupted my normal stream of activity. And I became quite alarmed at the massive amount of videos out there, websites, and even in the main street news and the newspapers and the news on the TVs about the alarming predictions about a catastrophe or economic collapse or even World War III and all these other things, weaponized technologies, monitoring everything we say and do. What are they preparing for? What have they prepared for in the past? So I've been reading this book while I was on vacation. The Final Secret of Pearl Harbor. Robert Theobald, United States Marines, retired, apparently a rear admiral. Should we believe a rear admiral who wrote a book with collaboration forwards by Rear Admiral Husband Kimmy, USN retired, and Fleet Admiral William Halsey, USN. So should we believe what this book says? The Final Secret of Pearl Harbor. And of course, they used Pearl Harbor to get the United States into World War II. Or did they? Were we really in World War II for a couple years, except the only people who didn't know about it were the United States citizens? Anyways, this book by these high-level members of the military, retired or whatever, tell all on the final secret of Pearl Harbor, and it is quite alarming. So I'll be reading from this book, Series 241 in my series, Freemasonry and Satanism, which I think has everything to do with what this author exposes with Freemasonry, with Satanism, which is also, in my opinion, the Illuminati, the Kabbalah, the Zionists, the secret societies, and this cabal of people who want to destroy Christianity and apparently even the Islamic peoples and their religions in the Middle East, especially since 9/11, and the destruction over there in the Orient and apparently the world. I've talked about destruction in Brazil and Peru and Chile, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, civil war in the United States, and other kinds of economic destruction since 1913, when these evil entities, Illuminati, Zionists, Jewish elites, took control of the USA money supply away from the government, crashed the system at least 8 times, and apparently right now they're preparing for something big. And there's all kinds of videos on YouTube you can watch. Here's a short clip I made this morning on just some of the videos that are available with all these dire warnings. So what should we do? Should we just ignore this and wait till the big event happens? Or should we take actions personally, mentally, and warn others and maybe stock up on some supplies or make some phone calls and try to send letters to senators and representatives in the newspaper? Should we try to prevent what they're planning? Seriously, what should we do? See these videos I just made some clips from.
All I hear, in every place I look, I see housing crisis, I see recession in 2020, inverted yield curve. Everything's pointing to something ominous that's about to happen here.
Yep.
With all your research and everything that you've been looking at, are we headed into a recession?
We have already begun. We never really, Main Street never really pulled out of the crisis that happened in 2008. But, when you talk about mainstream media and you talk about the inverted yield curve, these guys talk out of both sides of their mouth, because they keep saying, and if the yield curve inverts, and then the next sentence they show you how indeed the yield curve has inverted. And in fact, it inverted in China. Their yield curve inverted in May of 2017. And in the EU, they are very near, if they haven't already gone into an inverted yield curve. So this is happening on a global basis, not just in one country or another. And we're all together in this mess. Yeah, I'm very nervous, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm very nervous.
So I've been watching these videos about the economic collapse and martial law, the global world order, the elites. And here they're talking about an inverted yield. So that seems to me that any kind of positive earnings, like in your checkbook being in the green, has turned around, inverted, so that basically you don't have enough in your checkbook, say, to pay your rent or buy groceries. And they're talking about this happening at a national level, or these different countries going into the red and not having enough money to pay their bills, etc. Here's some more videos I was looking at. A lot of people have heard about Anonymous and Q. Listen to what this guy says.
We have received credible information that leads us to believe with a very high degree of certainty that the US will come under attack, resulting in a nationwide blackout. The US Department of Homeland Security has just stated that Americans need to plan immediately for up to 6 months without electricity.
So this stuff just continues and continues. Here's another one.
Artificial intelligence given them the ultimate scrying ball and technology they needed to form minority reports and log us on virtual kill lists and in future FEMA prison camps.
Artificial intelligence, the ever-expanding installation of the microwave towers I see beside the highways and the roads these days. Apparently a system to monitor every single thing that you and I say and do. Even those boxes, Siri or Google or Echo, probably even our cell phones, maybe our refrigerators and smart cars and smart meters. They are collecting and gathering the data every day, every week, every month, and they've been doing it for years. They want to know who is who. Whenever they probably enact a martial law, police state activity, world revolution, they call it, etc. Maybe the scenario will be that the United States declares war on China, or maybe Russia, etc., or both, of course. And that means everybody in the United States will have to go into austerity mode. In other words, you don't get to do what you want to do. You no longer have freedoms. Everybody is assigned to a job during a war. Some people are recruited to go to war. And anybody who resists or rejects the president's orders will, of course, be accused of being a traitor, insurgency, and they'll have all these advanced technologies and weapons to take us out for not obeying the laws, conserving water, not driving, using your car, and everything else, buying alcohol, certainly buying drugs, or turning in your cash money to get digital currency. It certainly seems kind of ominous, and all these videos are readily available for anybody to go watch. Here, let me continue this one.
Is the U.S. Department of Homeland Security partnering with international entities to prepare for martial law in the United States? In this documentary series, we are about to uncover a nefarious plan that presumably leads to an international globalist takeover of the United States and other Western countries on this planet. And they deem you to be so simple-minded that you will stay ignorant to all of this. They deem you to be so simple-minded that you should just go ahead and surrender all your rights as a human being over to them.
Let's continue here. So if you go on to YouTube and you put in global world order or economic collapse, many different keywords, and you'll come up with these types of videos. These YouTube recommended, it says here, because I guess they pay attention to the types of videos and material that I watch. So they continue to send me information. And I suspect it's controlled information. And they want me and you and everybody to believe these things. Department of Homeland Security, catastrophic grid collapse. That's no electricity, probably no gas. That means the electric will force the water companies to shut down, the sewer companies to shut down. The planet will be theirs. This is happening worldwide. Curry Good, update on the war above the earth. They have all this stuff to distract us or deceive us. Continuing on here. A solemn warning is being pronounced. Agenda 21, everyone in America needs to watch this video. What they're not telling you about the government. Do not watch this video alone in the night. Trump versus the globalist terrorist federal. Anonymous. We ignored this warning in 1967. So this has been going on a long time. I must agree. People say, oh, Rick, they've been saying this for a long time. Well, yes, they have. At the end of the year, the end of all things. So I've been watching numerous videos while I've been on my Christmas vacation. I went away for a few days, took my laptop and used the Wi-Fi at the Holiday Inn. And it was just alarming to me, all the predictions about the collapse of the entire system right away. End of the year, end of all things. What a Green Beret told me about the shit hits the fan. These are all current recommended videos. Extinction level event begins. 2018 cell phone viruses use frequency for mind control, I suspect it says, yes. FEMA barges hundreds of people. So they have all these, it says here, hundreds of people being drowned. Major announcement by Cliff High. Apparently Cliff High monitors the chatter on the internet. And he says major announcements are coming. Elon Musk warns about coming World War III. So what does Elon Musk know? And it also says the Dark Age. So are we going to return to a Dark Age? The government wants you to have 6 months food on hand. Why would they want everybody to have 6 months food on hand? The martial law conspiracy. So I go through and watch these videos. And this guy here, William Mont, is spewing out a lot of this gloom and doom and world destruction. Loan market freezes. Martial law right after Christmas. I was watching him over the holiday. How to survive the Christmas dinner. Here's one here, stopthecrime.net. War on all ghost armies, global attack centers, small cell warriors. Here's one here by John X. Army. If the American people knew what this government is planning, they would rise up and overthrow it. Here's one, Jimmy Lee interview, aplaintruth.info, weather warfare. So apparently they control the weather, and they're predicting an Earth pole is moving. And what just happened, earthquakes, volcanoes, crazy weather. And then, of course, Lisa Haven published a few videos I watched over the holiday weekend. Double warning issued. Government says prepare. Trump promises to shut down chemtrail planes. This is Richie from Boston. I watched his videos. So there you have it. All this stuff about the destruction and collapse of the economic system and the world that we know it. FEMA camps, deaths, worldwide revolution or war. FEMA, DHS, warn and prepare for catastrophic power. So I ask anybody watching my video, when you see all these videos, why 2019 will be a prophetic year? When you watch and see all these videos, are we to believe these people are all employed by some nefarious propaganda organization trying to make us believe this stuff? And if they were, why would they do that? Talk about my videos. Why am I making them? Does anybody believe I'm making them to try to intentionally deceive people or something like that? So it's difficult to know who to trust and what to believe, but I do believe we can all agree that these videos are available for anybody to watch. This information is being put out there. So now the crazy question is, why are they doing this? And are a lot of these people sincere people who want to try to warn us? And are some of the videos like Anonymous or Q doing it as part of some kind of deception? I wonder. Do you wonder? All right, before I begin reading from The Final Secret of Pearl Harbor, Here's some other books I'm looking at reading. I just got in the mail, etc. Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War, Patrick Buchanan. Unnecessary war. And the more I keep researching, the more that I have agreed that it was totally unnecessary to have World War I or World War II, but it was needed for these people to take over the world to bring us a global world order, fulfilling a biblical prophecy of people receiving the mark of the beast, not being able to buy or sell, and those who refuse to swear allegiance to some Lucifer satanic deity god. The preferred way to deal with them is by beheading them. Apparently, the United States in secret passed something called Noahide laws, and apparently, if you look it up on the internet, the government has purchased 30,000 plus or minus guillotines, built FEMA camps, has fields full of coffins, all kinds of preparations. For what? And why? And why was World War II unnecessary? Did Hitler want a war? Who wanted the war? It's all in these big, thick books. Even in World War I, they were preparing and actively at war before they told the people. And it took them a year or so to get America into the war, falsifying information about this ship supposedly being sunk by some Germans. But there's more to the story in this big, thick book. The startling truth about one of the most fateful of all disasters of the sea, Colin Simpson. Now, to me, and maybe I'm just one of those ultra sensitive people, but even if one person gets killed, I get concerned. But the millions and millions that were killed in World War I and World War II, and since then, and the billions apparently they plan on killing in World War III or the World Revolution, is enough that everybody should be concerned. Other books, I've been doing my homework, watching videos, reading books, learning about these different authors. Weapons of Mass Deception. The use of propaganda in Bush's war on Iraq. And if anybody wants to be honest, that's the story. I will wait to overthrow your decadent regime until the Americans are defeated, infidel. Great, and I won't send you and your followers to paradise quite yet. And the movie producer, George Bush, says, "Cut, guys. If you can't do better than that, the audience is never going to believe the script. From the top, and remember, you're supposed to be buddies." Sheldon Rampton and John Streiber, author of Trust Us, were experts. Weapons of Mass Deception, the uses of propaganda in Bush's war on Iraq. We should pay attention to these books. These authors wrote them, probably at risk to their careers and lives and even families' lives. Unconditional Hatred. German War Guilt and the Future of Europe. Captain Russell Greenfeld, R.M. Of course, JFK, the CIA, Vietnam, and the plot to assassinate John F. Kennedy. Fletcher Poultry, whose theories inspired the movie JFK. Another book on Pearl Harbor, Joe Tolan, Infamy, Pearl Harbor and its Aftermaths. The Complete Shocking True Story by the Dean of World War II Historians. Just goes on and on and on, all these books I have. A planned deception. The staging of a New Age Messiah. Make no mistake, all this is anti-Christian. Pro-satanic doctrine, New Age. Constance Cumby, author of The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. I made a book review or two on that book by Constance Cumby a couple years ago. So what really went on overseas? What's going on with Germany and Serbia and Belgrade and Belgium and Russia and France and Britain and Italy, etc.? Pulling and controlling the United States and deceiving we the people. Serbia's secret war. This is an interesting postage stamp, this picture on this book. Apparently, there were people trying to expose the Freemasons and their involvement, but what caught my eye was the Freemason in this picture. You can see his apron. And of course, he has the six-pointed star of David, the Zionist of Israel, on his shirt, tying the Freemasons with Israel, the Kabbalah, and Zionism, and the anti-Christianity. Remember, they crucified Jesus Christ. So this book, I've been reading it. It's quite interesting. And this is on a postage stamp, trying to expose the Illuminati with the Kabbalistic satanic symbol on the shirt there with the apron and the sword. Freemasons, Knights Templar, secret societies, and these Illuminati cults. Propaganda and the Deceit of History. Philip Cohn, forward by David Reisman. I've been reading this one. I'll be making a video on it right away. Amazing information. What we the people don't know. Just got this in the mail today. Hidden History. The Secret Origins of the First World War. Jerry Daugherty, Jim McGregor. Hidden History. The back of the book says, the history of the First World War is deliberately concocted. Think about 9/11. That story, how that happened and who did it. Deliberately concocted. I added that. Not the sacrifice, the heroism, and the horrendous waste of life, or the misery that followed. No, these were very real. But the truth of how it all began, and how it was unnecessarily and deliberately prolonged beyond 1915 and has been successfully covered up for a century. Hidden History, World War I. Big, thick book, famous author, great material, sourced by other people. Should we pay attention to this stuff? I think we should. So those are just some of the newer books I got in the mail and books I've been reading every day. I read a little bit from this book and a little bit from that book and a little bit from another book. I watch videos and I do different assorted types of research so I don't get bored myself, and my intuition kind of guides me on these different topics. And somehow I'm on this topic of World War I, World War II. Apparently, the evidence shows me that these people in power controlling the United States, Britain, Germany, and all the other countries, Russia, China, Japan, they were at war for years before we the people found out. And these elites who are vying for a new age, anti-Christian age, and a new world order, a global world order, were behind the efforts to bring us World War I and World War II and 9/11 and so much more. And apparently and clearly, if we want to be honest with ourselves, World War III or some kind of world war revolution, crashing the economy, shutting down the electric grid, food supplies, water supplies, maybe a plague or two, who knows what they'll do. But it certainly seems like they're planning to do something. Should we, the people, pay attention? Should we be asking questions? Should we be taking this serious? Especially when we find out what they did to bring us the French Revolution in 1885, I believe, the Russian Revolution in 1917 after World War I, murdering millions and millions, the Chinese Revolution, killing millions and millions, and other wars and revolutions during the whole 1800s and a good portion of the 1700s. These people are serious, so serious, they'll work hard for 300 years to bring about the world destruction in their global world order. And that's not funny. We, the people, should be taking this quite serious, in my opinion. What do you think? Leave a comment in the comment section. It's important to remember when reading from a book like this, The Final Secret of Pearl Harbor, by a Rear Admiral retired, Robert Theobald, and other high-level military officers, about the other things that are going on at the same time in history and even biblical prophecies, etc. Because if you pay attention and listen to all the other things and think about it, it really paints a very interesting story. So the main deduction, as you know, I highlight, pre-read this material. The main deduction, President Roosevelt circumvents American pacifism. So the president and the elites who control the United States wanted the war. The people did not. Remember, we were involved in World War I, and Germany was defeated. And after the war, Germany was thrown to the wolves, so to speak, the Illuminati Zionist secret societies, who treated them very harshly when Germany didn't even want World War I. Why were the Zionist, elitist, Jewish banksters, Illuminati, put in control of Germany's future? The war was supposed to be between Britain and Germany, was it not? But the deception shows that was not the case. It's about people trying to fulfill a biblical prophecy. And I hate to keep bringing that up, but that's what it is. It's about Zionism and the Kabbalah and the kingdom of Judea, which is anti-Christian. Don't believe that garbage when they tell you about a Jewish-Christian connection. There isn't one. The Jewish people of the past crucified Jesus. Have they ever said that they regretted doing that? Absolutely not. Sarah Silverstein, Silverman, whatever her name is, the comedian, gets on TV and says, and if Jesus came back, we'd kill him again. You can go look that up. So the main deduction, President Roosevelt circumvents American pacifism. So I'm paying attention to the dates here. December 1941 is when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. So what happened in 1940, the entire year, and 1941, the entire year? The event happened, Pearl Harbor being attacked was December 1941. Quite a bit happened, a lot of agitation and trying to provoke Japan and Germany into activities. So apparently these secret elite people who control our world with the secret societies could make the world believe it was them. Just like with the 911. Oh, the Arabs did it. They planned it in a cave. We now know that is absolutely not the case. A lot more to that story. So in the spring of 1940, Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium, France were conquered by Germany, and throughout the remainder of the year, Great Britain's situation was so desperate that many expected her collapse early in the ensuing year, spring of 1940. Fortunately, however, the Axis powers turned east in 1941 to conquer Greece and to attack Russia. There is every reason to believe that when France was overcome, President Roosevelt became convinced the United States must fight beside Great Britain, while the latter was still an active belligerent, or later sustained to fight alone as the last democratic stronghold in a Nazi world. And again, Nazi means nationalism. And of course, with this pursuit of a global world order, they ridicule and demonize people who want to be patriotic and nationalist. They call you Nazis even in the United States if you want to be promote nationalism versus globalism. And globalism is, of course, communism. And that is in fulfillment of certain elites controlling the rest of us as slaves. Fulfilling a satanic biblical prophecy, FYI. Never, however, had the country been less prepared for war, both psychologically and physically. Isolationism. Some words I have trouble saying. Isolation. So we American citizens wanted to stay out of the war. Was a dominant philosophy throughout the land, and the armed forces were weak and consequently unready. The United States not only had become an active participant in democracy's fight as quickly as possible, the United States had not only to become an active participant in democracy's fight as quickly as possible, but a people completely united in support of the war effort had to be brought into the arena. So I mentioned that now about this World Revolution 2018, December 26th, with all these surveillance systems, monitoring systems, collecting data on us. When they bring about this World War III, they'll be able to tell who are the resistors and the insurgents. And they have all these weaponized technologies and other means to cut off your debit card, credit card, any kind of retirement income. You lose your job. Make criminals out of a lot of us who don't want World War III and kill 6 billion people. So it seems. But it says in this book, but how could a country be made to fight? Only a cataclysmic happening could move Congress to enact a declaration of war, and that action would not guarantee that the nation's response would be completely united support, which victory had always demanded. Remember how they tricked us all at 9/11? They did it during World War II and World War I, and so many other events. This was the president's problem, and his solution was based upon the simple fact that while it takes two to make a fight, either one may start it. As the people of this country were so strongly opposed to war, one of the Axis powers must be forced to involve the United States. So they needed Germany or Japan to attack the United States. That's why they needed Pearl Harbor. And in such a way as to arouse the American people to wholehearted belief in the necessity of fighting, just like after 9/11, overthrowing all those countries and murdering all those Arabs. Who really believes Arab people are evil? Then they demonize the Mexican. Who really believes the Mexican people are evil? Then they demonize China and the trade war. Who wants to believe that all the Chinese are demonized or evil people? And Japan, who wants to believe all Japanese are evil people? Or Russians are all evil people? Or the Germans are all evil people? Who's next? Brazil? India? Pakistan? I suppose if we don't wake up, this will continue until the ultimate end of the global world order. So how can they motivate all the people to be patriotic and want to go to war and destroy Japan and Germany and the other nations that had joined them? Turkey, whatever. This would require drastic action. And the decision was unquestionably a difficult one for the president to make. And even like the current President Donald Trump and all the things that he's doing, who wants to actually believe that he is intentionally making all those decisions and doing all those things at his age? He's just the spokesman, the puppet, the people behind him who want this global world order. And they say those words. But he does a good job, and he had a lot of experience on his TV programs that he was creating, firing everybody, ranting. So he was the perfect man for the job. So they know what they're doing. He was well groomed and trained for this, President Donald Trump. In this connection, it should be remembered that Japan, Germany, and Italy signed a tripartite treaty on September 28, 1940. So Germany and Italy and Japan had a treaty, just like the United States and other countries have now, that if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. And back then, Germany was a popular nation. Most of the immigrants in the United States were German. Japan was trying to unite Asia into one trading bloc, now controlled by, of course, NATO and America and Britain and the Eastern countries. Why should we in NATO, America, Canada, Britain, etc., be controlling all those countries in the Middle East? And so many of those presidents and people have been murdered over the years. Why should we be controlling all the countries in Central and South America? I guess I don't think correctly like these Illuminati, Kabbalistic, Zionist folks. I don't think we should be doing that. I believe not to play on Christmas anymore, but that Jesus taught that we should love one another. I'm all for love and peace, not war and hate. But apparently a lot of people are being driven to desire war and hate, even with the games they give the kids at Christmas time, with the monsters or machine guns and war games, training them when they're young. So the three nations agreed to make common cause against any nation not then a participant of the European War or the Sino-Japanese conflict, which attacked one of the signatories. Thereafter, the fact that war with Japan meant war with Germany, and Italy played an important part in President Roosevelt's diplomatic strategy. So if Italy was one of the signatories on this treaty, and Rome, of course, the home base for the Catholic religion, was in Italy, and Germans were pro-Christians, and they even had major cities in Japan that were Christian, and one of those cities was struck with a nuclear bomb. Did you know that? I made a video on that book. A lot of stuff going on people are not aware of. The satanic symbolism to a lot of this. Anyways, throughout the approach to war during the fighting, the primary U.S. objective was to defeat of Germany. To implement the solution of his problem, the president, Roosevelt, instituted a successful campaign to correct the nation's military unpreparedness. So the United States, before World War II was involved with the United States, we were preparing the nation for military war, the industrial industry, and offered Germany repeated provocations. So they were provoking Germany, and this is written by a retired rear admiral, so I suppose we can believe what he's writing in this book. But I'm sure if I go on Snoops, they'll say this guy was a bad guy, if he's in Snoops. By violations of neutrality and diplomatic usage, and I read a good portion of this book, so I know what's in it, and applied ever-increasing diplomatic economic pressure upon Japan. And we've seen so many embargoes against different countries in the past 10, 20 years. It's a never-ending thing they do to threaten economic destruction, even like with Iran right now, and the sanctions against Russia right now, and China right now, and President Donald Trump with tariffs and all this. So all this activity of economic destruction causing pain and suffering to the citizens brings about wars, of course. So increasing diplomatic economic pressure upon Japan, which reached its sustained climax on July 25, 1941. So they were really putting the screws to Japan in July 1941. 6 months later, in December, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I wonder what any other country would do. What if they totally shut down Iran? What would force Iran to react? Or Russia? Or India? Or any country? Apparently, the screws are being put to Venezuela right now. Even some activity with the economic collapse in Argentina, Greece, Italy having problems right now, and the world. They even say we the United States, which seems to have been artificially propped up, is about to economically be collapsed. And apparently they caused difficult economic depression type problems prior to World War I and World War II, for 10 years prior to World War II. And then by then the people are so much in dire straits, not working and not eating, that they'll look forward to anything to get out of that situation. So if they bring about a World War III and they crash the economic system in the United States, maybe the people will be in some kind of jubilee just to get out of that situation and go off there and kill millions and billions of people. Makes you wonder what kind of plan God has. I think one of God's plan is for people to wake up and see that they're being played for fools. Just saying, that's what it seems like to me. So the sustained climax on July 25, 1941, when the United States, Great Britain, and the Netherlands stopped their trade with Japan and subjected her to almost complete economic encirclement. So no supplies in and out of Japan. No oil, no food, no nothing. I guess that's one way to get a war going. Made mutual commitments with the British Prime Minister at Newfoundland on August 1941, which promised mutual support in the event that the United States, Great Britain, or a third country, not then at war, were attacked by Japan in the Pacific. Terminated the Washington Conference with the note on November 26, 1941, which gave Japan no choice but to surrender or war. So they were giving Japan an ultimatum: surrender now or the United States is coming, of course unbeknownst to the American people. Retained a weak Pacific fleet in Hawaiian waters, despite contrary naval advice, where it served only one diplomatic purpose: an invitation to the Japanese surprise attack. So they maintained a weak fleet in the Hawaiian ports. And of course, Hawaii, being closer to Japan, had lots of Japanese citizens who could report on this. So they were preparing the sitting duck, enticing Japan to attack it. And even the military leader of that base in Hawaii continued to warn the president, Roosevelt, that this was not a desirable situation, that he should move the fleet off the coast of California, etc. But the president, appears from this material in this book, wanted the temptation to be there, the sitting duck, so that they would be attacked. And if he did that intentionally, which there's plenty of evidence in this book, even written about by the Rear Admiral and other officers, to me that would be quite the evil thing to do to the people of the USA by our own government. furthered that surprise by causing the Hawaiian commanders to be denied invaluable information from decoded Japanese dispatches concerning the rapid approach of the war and the strong probability that the attack would be directed at Pearl Harbor. So the President Roosevelt and other elites, probably the Zionist, Illuminati people who controlled the United States even during World War I, told the president not to alert the commanders at Hawaii. But also, the officials knew that the Japanese had many spies in Hawaii and saw the situation of the weak fleet sitting there. According to this rear admiral, the denial of information was a vital feature of enticing a Japanese surprise attack upon Pearl Harbor. If Admiral Kemmel and General Short had been given the knowledge possessed by the Washington authorities, the Hawaiian commands would have been alerted against the overseas attack. And also the 911 Twin Towers. Apparently, there's plenty of evidence to show that the preparations and warning signs were there. But everybody wanted to stand down, even Vice President Dick Cheney, when they wanted to launch planes into the air, the military, to stop the planes that were flying into buildings. Vice President Dick Cheney demanded those officers stand down and not send any jet fighters into the air. Go watch series number 8, I think, of my book, 12, series 12, Freemasonry and Satanism, Synthetic Terra 911 by Webster Tarpley, and so many other books. So it's so funny when you read about these books, about the bring about World War I, the United States into the war, and World War II bringing the United States into the war, and 911 bringing the United States into destroying all those countries, toppling them in the Middle East. They seem to continually deceive we the people and plan these events years in advance. And that information is in this book. The Pacific Fleet would have kept the sea during the first days of December 1941 until the issue of peace or war had been decided. With the highly effective Japanese espionage in Hawaii, this would have caused Tokyo to cancel the surprise attack. So if the commanders would have taken the ships to sea, they would not have been sitting ducks, and the Japanese would have had to cancel the attack. So they didn't want the commanders to know. They wanted to get the United States in the war, but they had a problem with the people of the USA who were pacifists and didn't want to be in a war. And I don't think we should have been in a war. Germany didn't want a war. Germany lost World War I. Because of the entry of the USA into the war. The last thing they wanted was the USA into the war, and they didn't want to do anything to provoke us. So there were other reasons for World War II. One of those reasons was the Britons didn't honor the Balfour Agreement, which said that they would enforce Palestine to let the Zionist Jewish people create the state of Israel. They didn't want to turn against all those countries in the Middle East. And I can see why. So they had to have World War II to continue to destroy the Ottoman Empire and the people who controlled the Middle East and persuade our leaders to have the Zionist, Kabbalistic, apparently satanic, elitist Jewish people create the state of Israel. Apparently, they're not original Jewish people, according to Revelation 2.9 and 3.9. Jews who call themselves Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. And of course, we've all seen all those satanic symbols and rituals they put before us all the time, like that statue of the devil in Oklahoma and Detroit and apparently now in forget the name of that state where Bill Clinton was from. Apparently, in one of the courthouses, there's the Ten Commandments, so they want to move the statue of the devil down there. So it is an anti-Christian thing that's going on. There's kind of no doubt about that if you're aware of all these satanic rituals. I've mentioned many times in many videos. Back to the book. The problem which faced Lincoln during March of 1861 was identical in principle. So even the reason that they brought the Civil War to the United States in 1861 to unite the sentiments of the North behind the policy of compelling the succeeding Southern states by a force of arms to return to the Union. So the problem is always, how do you convince the people to support the war effort, destruction of other countries, peoples? For a month after his inauguration, he made no move, and then South Carolina's insistent demand for the surrender of Fort Sumter gave him the answer to his problems. He refused to surrender the fort and dispatched a fleet to reprovision it. So South Carolina wanted to secede from the Union and wanted the North to abandon the fort they had down there. And so then that gave the North the reason to go and support Fort Sumter. Weirdly enough, a lot of Sumter counties all over the United States. I like to pay attention to the name of counties and cities and the statues. I saw some statues in Charleston in the past few days, and I could see a lot of symbolisms of the Freemasons and the secret societies and the buildings, the older architecture in the cities. Quite a fascinating thing to go take a look of and get your camera out and take some pictures. See if there's a major city near you and you can go to the old historic downtown and look up and see things like gargoyles and Masonic symbols, etc. South Carolina had fired the first shots in the Civil War. Pearl Harbor was President Roosevelt's Fort Sumter. So these things are planned. These people are pretty intelligent in the art of getting the people involved in the war, like 9/11. Diplomatically, President Roosevelt's strategy of forcing Japan to war by unremitting and ever-increasing diplomatic economic pressure, and by simultaneously holding our fleet in Hawaii as an invitation to a surprise attack, was a complete success, says in this book. Militarily, our ship and personal losses mark December 7th, 1941, as the day of tragic defeat. One is forced to conclude that the anxiety to have Japan, beyond all possibility of dispute, commit the first act of war caused the president and his civilian advisors to disregard the military advice, which would have somewhat have cushioned the blow. So they didn't want to cushion the blow. The president, before the event, probably envisioned a Paney incident. That was the USS Paney, an American gunboat sunk by Japanese bombing planes on the Yangtze River in December 12, 1937. Wow, so all the way back in 37, there was these competitions for control of the countries in Asia. And so in 37, many years before December 1941, so that was the whole issue here. It was whether the Asian countries, Japan, etc., should be building an Asian empire, or whether the elites in Washington and Britain, etc., the Illuminati, Freemasonic, Zionist, Jewish people, should create their empire to control the world from here. And of course, you had other forces. The Germany was growing again after World War One, and Serbia was another country, and so it was a huge battle during all these wars for certain elites to try to build their regimes for world empires in one place or another, which certainly did not involve the citizens of any of these countries, whether you were Japanese, German, American, Canadian, Mexican, British, French, Italy. The citizens are sucked into these things, and the citizens are the ones who usually get killed. Somebody at a higher level, these elites, are playing games with us, and apparently they're into some kind of satanic cult religion. Mystery religion of Babylon, the religion of all the secret societies. Symbolisms are everywhere. Even in that one book I just showed you, the situation with Serbia, which was next to Germany, and Germany had a huge empire, Serbia wanted a huge empire. And apparently their forces they were fighting were the Freemasons on this postage stamp. You can see the apron and the sword and the Star of David on the shirt that you see in a lot of the New Age material, and all those rays of light. This occult symbolism is everywhere if you want to see it. So I need to continue reading this and get to the bottom of this story. So it wasn't just Austria or Germany or Italy or France or Britain or the US. A lot of countries were trying to get land and increase the size and control of their countries. But who controlled Serbia? Probably they were after these secret society people, you can see with the apron and the star. So evidently, even after the war, the secret society's elites wound up with Serbia and Germany and Austria and the United States and control of the world. All right, despite the fact that the attack laid the foundation for a complete victory, a terrific price was paid, as the following account of the ship, plane, and personal losses. So I'm not going to go into all the ships and battleships that were lost. There's more to read on this book. I'm going to move to the next chapter, President Roosevelt's progressive move towards war. Progress toward military preparedness. So they were preparing for World War II for years in advance. And even that other book review I made, Germany Must Perish, written by elite Jewish people, calling for the entire eradication, elimination, destruction of any person, men, women, and children, with German DNA. I'll show you that book I made a video on. Well, there's so much evidence out there to indicate all these things were planned, the world wars, 9/11, etc. Go watch my video on this book. Videos, maybe I made more than one. Freemasonry and Satanism. 9/11 Synthetic Terror. Look at the symbols. The people involved. The eagle, the pyramids. The Pentagon, the pyramid, the crown. Webster Griffin Tarpley. Series 12. I write on my books the number one so I know where they are on the bookshelf. And this one here too. Series 124. Germany must perish. Prior to World War II, they were calling for the elimination of every person to be killed. So it wasn't Germany that was just the target, it was Japan and apparently Italy. And you can go find this PDF free, Germany Must Perish, on archive.org and other related books for free. Here's the website, archive.org, and just put in there Germany Must Perish or the author. Theodore Kaufman's the author. So there's so much supporting material out there to show that this war, World War II, was planned years in advance. So it was inevitable that the citizens of the United States and the world, besides that, prior to World War II, remember, from 1930 onward, even before that, was the Great Depression. And the Great Depression was worldwide. And who controls the money supply but the Illuminati secret societies and Zionist Jewish banksters and the elites? All right, back to the book. So what do you think? Was it cool that the government prepared for war a couple years in advance, deceived the people? Who was the arch enemy? Was it the Germans? Was it the Japanese? Or was it both? Was it Italy? Who's next? What about the Civil War in the United States? Or the assassination of presidents like in Chile or Brazil or Costa Rica, Panama, etc.? Who's next? Apparently, World War III, we the people are next. So how does a president bring about a war? What does he have to do? Progress towards military preparedness. Now think about all the things they're predicting right now, what they're preparing for right now. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm concerned with. If they did it in the past, are they doing it now? Of course, to me, it's a rhetorical question and answer. The answer is, of course, it's all connected. This biblical prophecy, this plan they've had for a global world order, and all these systems, facial recognition, artificial intelligence, microwave transmitters, cashless society, microchipping children, controlling all the resources, getting rid of small businesses, robotic zombie type society. And if they do it, will we the people say, oh, I should have seen that coming. We should have done something. I'll bet that's what people will say. Despite the many handicaps that had to be overcome, the president's campaign for military preparedness was markedly successful during 1940 and 1941. So remember, Pearl Harbor happened December 6th, 1941. So they were preparing, agitating, and trying to provoke a war for 2 years. Germany didn't want a war with the USA. They were willing to do anything the USA wanted. So they had to be provoked. And apparently Germany, Japan, and Italy had a treaty. You go to war with one of us, you go to war with the rest of us. And of course, I think all sides are controlled by the elite, and they want the citizens to be fighting and killing each other. They have a different kind of chess game. But will we the people ever wake up and say stop it to these insane psychopaths, satanic, demonic entities they worship, anti-Christian, anti-Islamic, anti-Buddhist, anti-Hindu. They've done a lot of destruction and controlling all of these countries, including all of India and all of China, as you'll see in this book here. His best ally was a Congress with a majority in each house, anxious to wipe out the many years of inadequate appropriations for the military and the naval establishments. So why would the people in the Senate and the House of Representatives be seething for a huge military buildup in the United States? Is that what we, the people, wanted? Obviously not. It's we, the people, that died in these wars. When forced during the war under martial law circumstances to provide labor for these warmongers. On September 3rd, 1940, the United States obtained a long-term leases to outlying bases in Britain territory in exchange for 50 old destroyers. So we gave Britain 50 destroyers so we could lease some of the property over there in Britain for military bases prior to the war. So a war was coming in the minds of the USA leaders and the banksters who controlled the world. On September 16th, the Selective Service Act became law. So September 1940, a year and a half before the war, they instituted the Selective Service. So the war was coming. And meanwhile, remember, prior to the war and for the previous 10 plus years, the United States was in a severe economic depression, the Great Depression. That was all intentional too. Remember who controlled the American money supply since 1913? Who controlled the money supply in 1936 and 1930 and 1929, 1928? The same people. And they were causing a worldwide economic depression everywhere, worldwide. By the end of 1940, Congress had voted to immediately increase of the Army by 1 million enlisted men, with an eventual goal of 4 million, 50,000 planes for the Army Air Corps, 170,000 enlisted men for the Navy, 34,000 for the Marines, 15,000 planes, 10,000 pilots for the Navy Air Force, and a Navy building program which envisioned an eventual two-ocean Navy, embraced 17 battleships, 14 heavy cruisers, 40 light cruisers, 197 destroyers, and 74 submarines. Continuing his efforts, the president, on December 29, 1940, a year before Pearl Harbor attack, made a radio plea to the country for support for further large increases in the Army and Navy. Remember, we got a Great Depression going on. And the budget submitted in January 1941 recommended the then tremendous peacetime appropriations of 10 billion, 811 million for the military and naval establishments. That's quite a big number. 10 billion, 811 million, so basically 11 billion. On April 10th, 1941, the United States acquired defense rights in Greenland, and on July 1941, with the consent of that government, American military forces occupied Iceland before World War II. So don't let anybody convince anybody it was the attack on Pearl Harbor. Apparently, Germany, Japan, and these other countries were well under attack prior to the United States entry into the war. The only people who didn't know it were we the people. And think about that now with all that gloom and doom and predictions of a catastrophe happening to the world right now in 2018. Those videos I showed at the beginning of this video. We can see the warning signs. We can see the propaganda. We can see that they plan these things. We can know they have a purpose. But this time it's going to be hugely different with the microchipping of people, this facial recognition systems. This Worldwide 3 thing is going to be them against probably decent peoples of the world, the enslavement of the peoples of the world to biblical proportions. And remember, their religion is the mystery religion of Babylon, i.e. Satanism, Luciferianism, New Age, etc. We see all of that with the transgenderism, pansexual, all this other stuff, and the games for kids that are war games and monsters and killings and the TV programming. All this propaganda for climate change, global warming, sustainability, globalism, anti-nationalism, and trying to dilute, and I hate to say it, but apparently the different races with all this immigration issues. And I was watching the politician, a video on RT, on regular TV channel on the cable TV, talking about the new leader who's supposed to replace President Merkel in Germany. And they were talking about the two programs of globalization and immigration. They definitely want to dilute, apparently, the white race. And I wouldn't believe that or say that, but I keep seeing that and hearing that, and I know what they're doing. Apparently, they think a Christian or a white people have a threatening enough intelligence to be a threat to their global world order and will not remit and oblige them by being zombie-type slaves. And of course, they're going to be targeting all nationalities, Africans, Asians, Eastern Europeans, Western Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Central America, South America. This is an enslavement of the peoples of the planet, and apparently they think there's too many people right now. They want to have a huge population reduction. So how will they do that? What kind of tools do they have at their disposal? Okay, the provocation offered Germany. So they want to provoke Germany into attacking the U.S., and they're trying to provoke Japan for the same thing. Germany's complacent acceptance of American violations of neutrality was a surprising feature of the European war. So Germany knew the United States was arming the British and doing things over there, arming the Chinese, creating economic destruction for Germany and Japan and other countries. But they did not want a war with the U.S., the Germans. So they says here, complacent. Between June 1940 and December 1941. In fact, it was soon apparent that Germany did not intend to contribute to a break of diplomatic relations with the United States. American military intervention in Europe in the World War I had proved decisive, and Hitler obviously was not courting a repetition of World War II. And that's kind of obvious. And just like the Syria under attack right now and the stuff in the news, with the President Donald Trump apparently proclaiming he's pulling all the troops out of Syria. And there are a lot of videos saying there's something suspicious about bringing troops from all the countries all over the world back to the United States. What do they have planned for the United States? And then Greece or Turkey says they were planning on continuing assaults with the rebel troops, Syrians, battling the Assad regime, the president of Syria. So behind the scenes, while we're having all this other weirdness happen in our reality, they are continuing with that assault in the Middle East. So what all these videos and all this fear mongering that we see on the YouTube videos, etc., even in the mainstream news, might just be a huge distraction. But I think at the end of the day, they will pull something off. They certainly are preparing for it with all the technological advancements and installation of systems. The important American violations of neutrality during that period were shipments of considerable amounts of war material to Great Britain, commencing immediately after Dunkirk, the acquiring of overseas bases in British territory and in Greenland, Iceland, the giving to Great Britain of 50 destroyers, old destroyers, during a state of war between the country and Germany and Italy, the president's broadcast warning to the Axis. Remember President George Bush Jr.'s demonization of the axis of evil? So who is it? Is Iran the axis of evil? Syria? Germany? Japan? China? President Donald Trump causing economic issues there? Russia, so all kinds of threats there. Makes you wonder, when will the people wake up? So the president's broadcast warning to the Axis, December 29th, 1940, a year before the Pearl Harbor attack, that no dictator could weaken American determination to help Great Britain. Now remember, we declared independence from Great Britain in 1776. Not too many years ago. So who is the evil one? The one we fought the war with Britain? Or the World War I with the Germans? We sided with the Britons? Who controls Britain? The same people who took over the USA money supply? The Illuminati, Zionist, Jewish people into the Kabbalah? The religion of some kind of serpent being, fallen angels maybe, anti-God, anti-Jesus, anti-Islamic peoples, anti-humanity, period. The enactment of the Lend-Lease on March 11, 1941, and thereafter the extension of this unilateral wartime aid to the countries allied against the Axis, Great Britain, Russia, China, Greece, Holland, Norway, and Czechoslovakia. The closing of the German and Italian consulates, and the freezings of the assets of those countries in the United States by executive order in answer to Axis attacks on American shipping. The president's explanation to the world on July 1941, 6 months prior to Pearl Harbor, that the American occupation of Iceland was undertaken to forestall a possible seizure by Germany. 8, the announcement also in July 1941 that the United States Navy would keep the sea lanes open to Iceland and all other advanced garrisons, which meant a campaign against German submarines in the middle of the Western Atlantic. So apparently they were dropping mines into the oceans, trying to blow up the German submarines prior to the U.S. even going into war. And what is new? And it was weird. I saw a commercial or a news piece on RT today on the TV, December 26, 2018, where apparently that demonized group called Blackwater, with its activities that it had caused during the wars in the Middle East during the Bush administration. So apparently Blackwater had changed the name of its organization, but apparently they had a commercial today that's announcing Blackwater is back. Get ready, we're coming. A mercenary organization based in the United States. Oh my, Blackwater is back. Get ready, we're coming. Who are they coming for? What about all those warning videos I showed at the beginning of this video and so many more? Thousands, tens of thousands. It's too many to count of these videos declaring a collapse of the system is imminent. A worldwide revolution, maybe World War III, biological attack, economic attack. German submarines in the middle and western Atlantic, so they were bombing them. The president's public statement on September 11th, September 11th, 911, 1941. Isn't that strange? 911 in 1941. The president's public statement that American naval vessels and planes would fire on the Axis ships which entered waters vital to the American interest. Well, we've certainly heard a lot of that in my lifetime. It says here on the notes on the bottom of this page, throughout the fall of 1941, American destroyers attacked German submarines with depth charges with unknown results. During September and October, German submarines inflicted the following damage. The USS Greer torpedoed, the USS Salinas supply vessel torpedoed, the USS Kearney destroyer torpedoed, and the USS Reuben James destroyer sunk. And remember, these destroyers and ships were dropping depth charges on the German submarines. I mean, let's keep this two-sided and balanced. What would you do if they were bombing your ships and submarines and creating economic and supply embargoes and seizing all the funds and bank accounts from the Germans and Japanese and any other country that was part of this axis? So who was really the evil axis? And who's the evil axis today? Was once upon a time Germany evil, and is Germany now good? Was Japan once evil and now it's good? Who's evil now? China going to be the evil one? Whose side will Brazil take, or Canada take, or Mexico take? And of course, it's all one big malicious deception against we the people on the planet. Whoever sides with who, whatever they tell us in the news, obviously is planned. I don't want to say these things. I read these books and report. You can go get this book, published by a Rear Admiral. What year was this book published? 1954, by a Rear Admiral. You think he would know what happened in World War II? 1941, a Rear Admiral? I suspect he would know. Should we read this book and listen to this guy? Does history repeat itself? And again, a rhetorical question. Of course history repeats itself. These people have their methods and means of deceiving the rest of us. All right, American pressure on Japan. President Roosevelt's progressive tightening of the diplomatic economic pressure on Japan was most significant. On January 26, 1940, 6 months after the abrogation by the United States. So I had to look up that word, abrogation. And so, you have treaties and agreements with countries, right? And when you abrogate your relations, you annul those treaties, you do away with those treaties, and you repeal those treaties. Weirdly enough, just like President Donald Trump is doing with all the trade agreement treaties, NAFTA, and the Pacific trade agreements. So you think that's all planned? You think President Donald Trump is such a genius that he's making all these decisions? Or is it these elites behind the scenes, groups of people from these secret society, Illuminati, Zionist Jewish people, Israel, behind all of this? Again, another rhetorical question. Of course, it's these evil entities with this mystery religion of Babylon, with all the satanic symbols, the Arch of Baal they put in New York and London. And later I found out through UNESCO, the United Nations, they were putting 1,000 archways to Baal, the devil, all over the cities and countries of the world. 1,000 of them, paid for by the United Nations. And of course, the United Nations has a meditation room with a lot of occult symbolism. Again, the mystery religion of Babylon. Satanism, Lucifer, anti-Christian, anti-Islamic, anti-Buddhist, anti-Hindu, anti-humanity, microchipping people, cashless society, digital money, surveillance systems, artificial intelligence, software programs making decisions, not people. No empathy, no compassion, just a computer, metadata gathering information about you and me, things we say and what we do in our homes, in our cars, in our offices, with our friends, books we buy, TV programs we watch, stuff we might know. They might make us, deem us to be a threat, insurgent, traitor. You're not supposed to ask questions. Of course, the Arabs in a cave planned and executed 9/11. Don't listen to all that stuff and people tell you that makes sense. Listen to the stuff that doesn't make sense because the elites said it. They're God, not God, they would have us believe. The American-Japanese commercial treaty lapsed, and throughout the 1940s, successive restrictions stopped shipments of airplane fuel, scrap metal, and much-needed machinery and machine tools to Japan. So they had a complete embargo against Japan. Meanwhile, all these other countries were controlling all the other countries in the Middle East. It's in this book here. On October 9th, 1940, this country discontinued subsidies of wheat shipped to the Far East. So now we're stopping sending food to the Asian countries. Well, that's great. Taking all the resources, but now we're not going to send them any food. I guess that would cause a war. During 1941, Anglo-American support caused the Dutch East Indies to refuse to be forced into Japan's economic empire. So I'm reading this book and I'm saying the Dutch East Indies. So Holland, the Dutch over there by Britain in Europe, control a good portion of countries in Asia, the East Indies. So Japan can't be an influence in the Middle East, but the Dutch can, the British can, France can, and it's in this book. All these countries, European countries, can control the Middle East, China and everything, but they don't want Japan to have an influence in the Middle East. But wait a minute, isn't Japan right in the center of the Middle East? Hasn't it always been a leading empire in the Middle East? Not the Dutch, Holland, not the British, not the French. I guess Germany was getting too buddy-buddy with Japan. They didn't want Germany to be an influential power in the world. That's why they hated Germany so much. And Germany's relation with Turkey and the Ottoman Empire controlled the Middle East. That's why they had to destroy Turkey. This picture starts to make itself understandable when you see who the players are. So the Dutch East Indies. So I read this and I go, what are the Dutch over there controlling the Asian countries for? And to refuse to be forced into the Japan's economic empire. Early in 1941, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and the United States commenced to extend financial and military aid to China. So they were arming China during these disputes. Oh my. And at the same time, the Anglo-Saxon countries began to recall the recall of their citizens from the Far East. So the war was coming, and these countries in Europe and the United States are recalling the citizens from the Far East. On May 29, 1941, in retaliation for Japanese seizure of American gasoline in Hapong, an executive order stopped export from the Philippines to Japan of raw materials essential to the persecution of war. So they wanted Japan to just surrender, and America was not even in the war. But they were taking all these actions against Japan. On July 25, in answer to Japan's seizure of the French Indochina, so the French are in control of Indochina, and the Dutch with the East Indies, but Japan can't have an influence. That's odd. You would think Japan would be a country that should have an influence, that the European powers should make treaties with and negotiation with, but instead France wants to have a empire expansion. Holland wants to have an empire expansion. And apparently the British had a lot of expansionism in the Middle East. And apparently Germany's rise to power was threatening those empires and their control of countries in the Middle East. Maybe some of the Asian countries really wanted to deal with Germany. Maybe Germany was treating them fair. Just makes you wonder about these things. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to ask questions and wonder. If we don't think about this and ask these questions, what's going to happen to us in the near future? I'm for people getting along all over the world and not these elites enslaving and controlling and killing us and stealing from us, like they did here in the United States, crashing the economic system 8 times since 1913 when they created the Federal Reserve that they own. Families worked entire generations to acquire some land or something, and then these corporations and governments and elites crash the system and take it all away again and again and again and again. How many of these citizens that acquired some property and wealth probably treated the employees and other citizens much more fairly than these governmental capitalist or communist governments do? Again, a rhetorical question. Of course they treated them better. That's why they had to be destroyed. The government hates, the secret society hate treating people fairly and decently. That's why they have to destroy Christianity and Jesus preaching that we should love one another. Theirs is a religion of hate. And I know people don't want to comprehend that and deal with that. I didn't want to, but after all this research and all these books, this is series 241. That's 241 authors. Some of these authors have more than one book, so it's well over 250, 260, 270 books. More than one video per book. I got 600 today, I think, with this video on YouTube, and half of them or more are 2 hours. It's 900 hours of material, 800 plus hours. 14 years of research, press releases, magazines, watching videos, reading books, making comments on press releases, listening to other people, talking to people, and realizing there is no going out there on the street discussing this with people, because 85% of the people are mind controlled and will reject talking to you and actually get angry and vicious. So many people are mind controlled, like the Democrats hating the Republicans, 50% of the Americans, and 50% of the Republicans, Americans, hating the Democrats, and vice versa. When we're all citizens of the USA, just because people are Democrats because they grew up that way or they think it's the right way doesn't make them evil. And because some people grew up Republican doesn't make them evil. They grew up that way or they believe in the capitalist system. The capitalist system and the communist system are controlled by the same elite puppet masters. who are into a satanic, Luciferic mystery religion of Babylon. They've controlled the system for a long time. They control the banking system, the economic system, the education system, the medical systems, and everything, the movie industry, presses. And they bring us these wars, and it looks like they're planning a new one. They've talked about it for a few years, haven't they? Even in 1880-something, Albert Pike said 3 world wars would be required to bring about a new world order. All right, let me read on from this book here. On July 25, in answer to Japan's seizure of the French Indochina, the United States, Great Britain, and the Netherlands, acting in concert, froze Japanese assets and stopped all trade with the offending country. So wait a minute. Are the Japanese the evil people of the world? The Oriental people? Oh, wait a minute. Is it the German, the white people, the Nordics? Are they the evil people of the world? Weren't the Germans pro-Christian and decency and treating people fairly? And it's from what I read in this book by this Rear Admiral, the Japanese wanted to unite the Asian countries into a huge alliance. Is there something wrong with that? Why do the people who control our world want a worldwide globalism alliance, microchipping the people with surveillance systems? What do you think would be better? The system Japan wanted to do back then? The German people wanted to do back then? Or the people who control the world now, what they want to do? Again, another rhetorical question, if you've been doing any research. There's so much in this book, but I can only read what I can read in 2 hours plus my comments. Continuing on page 12. On Sunday, August 17th, 1941, the day of his return from Newfoundland, meeting with Mr. Churchill, President Roosevelt held a conference with Ambassador Numura, during which 2 State Departments papers were read and discussed. So Roosevelt is meeting with Churchill prior to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in Newfoundland. Copies of these papers were given to the Japanese ambassador for transmission to his government. Both documents contained strongly worded passages, although they were mainly concerned with a summary of informal conversations between the ambassador and the State Department during the preceding months, which had been interrupted when Japan occupied French Indochina. Admiral Numura was told that they were to be given the status of merely reference material. This permitted the president to express the American views in language which, in a formal note, could have precipitated an immediate crisis between the 2 countries. So apparently there were threats made. One of the papers was an answer to proposals for a meeting between President Roosevelt and Prince Kanoyi, the Japanese Prime Minister, for the resumption of informal conversations with Washington. Its most significant extracts were as follows. The acting Secretary of State pointed out that the government of the United States could only assume that the occupation by Japan of the French Indochina, so Japan was occupying part of China controlled by the French. So who should be controlling parts of China? Japan, its neighbor, or the French halfway across the world? Rhetorical question again. Okay, that constituted notice to the United States that Japan had taken by forceful means a step preparatory to embarking on further movements of conquest in the South Pacific area. So Japan seemed to be bent on conquest. Remember, the winners get to write the books on history. So who should have more control in the Middle East, France or Japan? And I don't think Japan was noted to be a particularly evil country for thousands of years. So there was all this empire building going on. Let's just be honest. The government of the United States, accordingly, had no alternative but to inform the Japanese ambassador that, in the opinion of this government, the measures then taken by the Japanese government had served to remove the basis for further conversations relative to a peaceful settlement in the Pacific area. It goes without saying that no proposals or suggestions affecting the rights and privileges of either of the United States or Japan would be considered except as they might be in conformity with the basic principles to which the United States had long been committed. If a program based on peaceable and constructive principles were to be adopted for the Pacific, and if thereafter any of the countries or areas within the Pacific were menaced, the policy of aiding nations resisting aggression would continue to be followed by this government, and this government would cooperate with other nations in extending assistance to any country threatened. Nice words. The other paper concluded with this warning. This government now finds it necessary to say to the government of Japan that if the Japanese government takes any further steps in pursuance of a policy or a program of military domination by force or threat of force of neighboring countries, the government of the United States will be compelled to take immediate any and all steps which may deem necessary towards safeguarding the legitimate rights and interests of the United States and the American nationals, towards ensuring the safety and security of the United States. So, of course, they're making these kinds of threats against Iran right now. And then, of course, blaming all the countries in the Middle East after 9/11. And let's not forget Germany and even recent bickering back and forth of accusations of the Russians and the Chinese and Pakistanians, Venezuelans on the siege right now. A country with more gold and oil than any country in the world, and the people are starving. Why is that? Again, a rhetorical question. The evil forces want the leaders of Venezuela to submit, or there will be an embargo, and people will suffer. On September 3rd, 1941, the United States asked Japan to accept the following 4 principles as a basis for any further discussion. So they weren't even willing to talk to Japan unless they agreed to these 4 principles. Let me read on. Respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all nations. And remember, Britain controlled a good portion of the Middle East, China, etc. The French did, the Dutch did, Holland. So apparently all these countries had to protect their interest in controlling these Asian countries, the people's enslavement, manufacturing, production of food, resources. Number 2, non-interference in the internal affairs of other nations. Of course, puppet presidents and prime ministers and leaders are put in place. Number 3, equality of opportunity in trade and economic matters. And number 4, the status quo throughout the Pacific area. Diplomatic exchanges during September accomplished nothing. And on October 2nd, the United States asked for clear-cut evidence that Japan intended to withdraw her troops from China and Indochina. And there were atrocities, apparently, by the Chinese and the Japanese and other Asian countries with each other, as there were with the countries all over Europe and Central South America during the course of the past couple thousand years. Of course, all the American Indians seemingly intentionally slaughtered in the United States in the battles for territory from the Spanish and the French and the Britons for territories in the United States and the Portuguese. So why drag the citizens of the world into these wars and cause so much destruction and pain and suffering and theft? And of course, a lot of perversion and sacrificing people in these satanic religions. Just saying, that's what it is. On October 16th, Prince Kanoes of Japan's cabinet resigned, and 2 days later, that of the General Tujo was installed. So the leader of Japan resigned, and a general was put in charge. And after all these embargoes and issues and attacks, I guess they would have to put a military leader in charge of the country. Washington immediately recognized that this change of cabinets was a decided step towards war. Japan had to break the economic encirclement to which she had been subjected since July 25, or abandon her plans to establish what she enthusiastically or emphatically characterized as an Asiatic co-prosperity sphere. So Japan wanted to create with the other countries in the Asia a Asian co-prosperity sphere. So what do you think? The Asians should have determined their own future? Or should it be the Europeans or the people who control America who were deceiving we, the American people, and the German people, and the British people, and the French citizens, these French Freemasons, Illuminati, secret societies, into a satanic religion? I've gone over so many books on these topics. So about the middle of November, Ambassador Extraordinary Krarusso joined Admiral Nomura, the accredited Japanese ambassador in Washington, to negotiate a solution to the U.S.-Japanese issues. So all this is going on while they're bombing German submarines. As a basis for the settlement of the differences, the ambassador proposed that the United States give Japan all the oil she needed and release the frozen Japanese assets. Number two, the United States cooperate with Japan to secure the goods and commodities from the Dutch East Indies. So the Dutch are controlling the East Indies, and the French are controlling the Indochina, which the two nations needed. Number three, Japan agreed to withdraw troops from French Indochina upon either the restoration of a peace between Japan and China, so Japan wanted peace between Japan and China, or the establishment of an equitable peace in the Pacific. And that's why Britain and the other countries were attacking Germany. Germany was a rising power, and these people who had their own empire had to protect it. So Japan's sitting there in Asia wanting a co-prosperity sphere. And of course, the Europeans and other peoples, the people who control our world, who took over the USA money supply, brought us the war between the states in the United States, and so much more wars and destruction and assassinations all over the world. In the meantime, Japan would withdraw troops from southern Indochina. When the United States agreed to the foregoing proposals, provided the United States and Japan should mutually agree not to advance troops into Southeastern Asia and the South Pacific, except in that part of the French Indochina where the Japanese troops were to be stationed. And of course, we got disputes over there right now with China and the China Sea. So who is the real enemy? Japan then or China now? Or the people who control the United States? Or do they just want to control the whole world with a new world order, a global world order, an anti-Christian religion? And again, rhetorical question, if you've been doing some homework. 15 days after the United States, Great Britain, and the Netherlands stopped their trade with Japan, as an answer to the latter's military occupation of French Indochina, President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill met at Newfoundland. The conference lasted from August 9th to the 13th, 1941. So 6 months prior, 5+ months prior to the attack at Pearl Harbor. A lot was going on here, as you can see, and some very technical, complex disputes for power and control of the regions. And look where we are today, and look what's happened during history. The attack against Vietnam, Koreans, and so much more. Manipulation of revolutions in Asia and Central America, Africa, South America, giving us crazy choices for president in 2016, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And apparently the presidents since Woodrow Wilson in 1913 have all been connected to the Illuminati secret societies with a Babylon, Mystery of Babylon religion cult. It all ties together. You can't just talk about one thing without seeing what's behind it, who the evil controllers are, the banksters controlling German banks, French banks, Britain banks, Italian banks, American banks, the World Bank, and all these other countries, the leadership put in control in Brazil, in Peru, in Chile, Panama, all these, Mexico. Turmoil, destruction, and wars going on, revolutions for a long time. Who's behind it? And there are some common denominators. Let's not deceive ourselves. These secret societies and elitists into this mystery religion, apparently some kind of reptilian, satanic, demonist religion, as described in the Bible. Fallen angels, evil, spiritual, demonic beings, part of this religion, and sacrificing people. Kind of creates some complex questions. Why all these evil forces on earth? Are we here for some kind of education and some kind of decision-making process? See what people will choose, whose side they will choose? The one official pronouncement concerning the conference was a joint statement known as the Atlantic Declaration, which was released in Washington on August 14th. This consisted of the enunciation of 8 principles which set forth the lack of aggression intentions on the part of the two countries, the post-war conditions which they deemed essential to a better world. So apparently Washington and Britain and these countries are having a meeting, and they're setting forth their lack of intentional aggression. But at the same time, they're planning their post-war conditions which they deemed essential to a better world, a global world order, a new world order, new age, anti-Christian. So they have a lack of aggression intentions while they're planning for a post-war, the activities after the war, which they will build a better war after 1945-46 when the World War II ended and the bombing, 2 nuclear bombs in Japan. They wanted to have a better world. They keep saying this. It never winds up that way. And certain post-war actions which they considered should be taken against the aggressor nations following their defeat. So they had already planned the defeat of Germany and Japan and other countries and probably Turkey and the Ottoman Empire and so many other revolutions and economic destruction worldwide for this better world. Do you believe it? And then all this propaganda and microchipping people and surveillance systems, this better world. The Atlantic Declaration was an expression of lofty sentiments which did nothing to further the Anglo-American cooperation in the rapidly developing Pacific situation, which was the reason for the conference. So I think I'll stop right there. I could keep on reading. There's a lot more material here showing the stuff that was going on between the leaders in the United States and the propaganda to deceive the people, convince them that the United States should join the war. And it's easier now to look back since World War II and see all the preparations, the false flag or deception called the Cold War, threats of Russia and nuking the United States, and in the classrooms having the kids scurry under their desk and people building nuclear bunkers in the United States and in Russia and all over the world, while the military industrial complex and the secret corporations were develop all these biological and technological weapons to bring us to where we are today. And of course, threats of the world collapsing at the year 2000 and computers all shutting down and the integration of all the power companies tied in with each other. That doesn't make sense because then if it goes down, they all go down. And the big corporate farming and the destruction of all the small farmers. So it's one huge thing. So if it collapses, it all collapses. And the internet now and so much more, microwave transmitters, AI, artificial intelligence, computer systems. It looks like they're getting closer and closer to their global control of everything and everyone, and apparently, like they're doing in China right now, some kind of thing like a credit score here in the United States, so you can borrow money and do things, even get a cell phone. If you got really bad credit, they probably want a huge deposit just to get a phone. But over there, they have like a behavioral scoring system, and everything, cameras everywhere in China. And people get demerits if they do something that the state doesn't like, even publishing material, maybe even purchasing or reading books or watching certain videos. And if you get enough bad points, you become I guess, a citizen that needs to be re-educated, and then your rights get restricted. This is all going on real time. Look it up on YouTube. And they're setting up a similar system, so it seems, here in the United States and all over Europe. We see the movies, where they can watch somebody wherever he goes with these cameras on every corner. And of course, we're all carrying our cell phones now, iPhones, etc. And Echo systems, Sirius system, Google systems that you can talk to, and monitoring systems. So this artificial intelligence system is listening and collecting data on all of us in preparation of a global world order. And they planned for it in World War I years in advance. They planned for it in World War II years in advance. They planned on 9/11 years in advance. And they're planning for something now. Is there any doubt? Anyways, thank you for watching my video. I continue to read the books and use my brain and think, and I just think there are some concerning things, especially the videos I was watching on my little Christmas vacation trip, taking my laptop and paying attention to the videos, and I just noticed a huge amount of warnings of different kinds of catastrophes and collapses worldwide. And of course, they've been doing it for a while. But they prepared for World War One. They prepared for the French Revolution. They prepared for the revolution or invasion into Russia. And of course, the Chinese Revolution and all these situations. They had to disarm the people, mass murdered all the ones they felt wouldn't go along. They collected data on them. Now they have the beast computer systems. So it ought to be much more interesting on this World War III revolution type thing, where again, we the people, everybody gets deceived, and some people are going to join the Democrats and the Republicans. Some are going to join the New Age, satanic, Luciferian, do as thou wilt. Some people are going to embrace the Christian religion. Some people are going to embrace the society, family values against all these people that want to turn into the freak show and pansexualism. And of course, the young people against the old people, the people with money against the people with no money, and the riots in the streets, and the blacks against the whites, all instigated with the propaganda we see in the press releases every day. Straights against the homosexuals and gay peoples, etc., etc. They have all kinds of tools at their disposal, and apparently they're using them. But it just makes me wonder, when or will the people wake up and see through all this deception? And if we did wake up and we talk to one another, we could stop this tomorrow. Whatever is coming doesn't have to happen, in my opinion. Again, thanks for watching my video. Rick Merico reporting.